Welcome to Globewatch with me, Charles Obune, from the Hilton Hotel here in Yaoundé. The global economic outlook still looks like a candle in the wind because of the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. How do we assess the impact of the pandemic on African economies, and how does the perspective look like from a World Bank point of view? My guest today is the chief economist of the World Bank for the African region, Dr. Albert Zeufack. Welcome to Globewatch.
Thank you so much, Charles, for having me.
Quickly, you know the environment in which the global economy is evolving. What are the forecasts for the African region currently?
Charles, what COVID has done is unprecedented. In 2020, the sub-Saharan African region went into a recession for the first time in more than 20 years. So we had a contraction of 2% of GDP for the sub-region. In 2021, we're exiting recession. We are moving progressively to a positive growth, and we are forecasting around 3.1 to 3.4% in 2021, and hopefully around 3.5, 3.6% in 2022. Charles, this is good news because we're exiting recession, but it is still very fragile recovery because COVID is not over, unfortunately. And second, we're having other real disturbance in the global economy, including the crisis in Russia now that is certainly going to have some effects on our economies, including through commodity prices, including through the tightening financing conditions in the world. So we're recovering, but recovery remains very fragile, and we need to continue really to reform our economies to make sure we boost that growth because it's still quite weak.
The progress looks fragile, like you indicated. Which are some of these key countries in Africa that will sustain the growth?
Charles, what we need to know is, unfortunately, 3 countries in Africa accounts for more than 60% of our GDP. That's
which are?
Nigeria, South Africa, and Angola, in that order. Which means when there is no recovery in these economies, it's difficult for the rest of the continent to actually show positive average growth. So the situation is a little bit dire because, yes, we have seen a sharp increase in oil prices on which both Nigeria and Angola depends on. Commodity prices have been increasing as well, mineral prices that South Africa exports as well. So we're seeing a positive outlook for these 3 economies, and that's why we are actually projecting above 3.5% in 2022. But with all the, the uncertainties in the global economy, with the change in monetary policies in the US, for example, where all the subsidies are being cut down, and all the policies, the fiscal policies that were implemented to cope for the pandemic are now being reduced. What is happening is there could be an increase in interest rates globally, and that would affect our access to financial markets as well, and that could have an impact on debt. So, yeah.
COVID is yet to be over, especially with the emergence of new variants like Omicron, Delta, which had been existing, and this has had a lot of pressure on some key sectors of the African economy, which were already booming and they were driving growth, especially the tourism sector and the aviation industry. This taking off, which are the key sectors that will define the next growth?
Charles, you're absolutely right. COVID really, led to a standstill on sectors like tourism. I just came back from Madagascar, the economy was devastated because they depended so much on tourism. Islands, nations like Mauritius or the Seychelles had a 7% contraction in
Morocco,
GDP.
Tunisia.
Absolutely. Cabo Verde, all these economies that depended solely on tourism were the most badly affected by COVID. But resilience during COVID was actually related to the digital economy. Countries that had a better infrastructure on the digital already actually saw a kind of silver lining from this crisis. People could actually interact a little bit more through the digital means, and you know, with school interruptions, countries that were, you know, that had, you know, broadband and that could actually have it, you know, reliable and affordable, were able to actually leverage the digital to position themselves for the future economy. Because we believe, from our studies, we understand that the future of work is actually going to be dictated by how good countries invest in the digital economy.
From your studies, you are just from presenting a publication about the new economic environment in which most African countries are operating today. Which are some of the key findings according to the World Bank?
We just launched a book on market access in troubled times. And Charles, times are actually quite troubled because, as we said, COVID led to a disruption in supply chains, led to inflation.
Without interrupting you,
yes.
Are our markets today what they used to call in the 1930s repression period a blank check in a failing bank?
Well, you know, COVID was probably close to the 1920s crisis, for sure. But what is even more damning, that
according to the study,
let me come back to that. You know, what is more damning here is COVID has led to the kind of disruption we had not seen in previous crises, which is the shock on human capital accumulation. Number of kids who went out didn't come back to schools when schools reopened. So that's a huge pressure on human capital accumulation, and you know, the consequences could be very, very disastrous down the road. Now, in terms of findings of this new book on market access, first is Africa needs a new trade policy, because what we've been doing is not working. Africa's contribution to global trade has remained stubbornly low at around 3% all these years. And Africa only contributes 2% to global exports and only 1% to global exports of manufacturers. We cannot continue in this same path, because it's not the kind of trade that delivers jobs. It's not the kind of trade that delivers for the African people. So we need to change our trade policy. We need to reassess our trade agreements with traditional markets. We are suggesting that countries actually build supply capacity to make sure they are able to take advantage of those trade agreements like AGOA or EBA in Europe, and ensure that we claim a bigger share of the global economy. So reassessing existing trade agreements with traditional partners. But the second important pillar of that new strategy we are proposing is to strategically position to take advantage of the growing Asian market. The middle class is growing extremely fast in Asia, and it's about time for Africa to actually think of negotiating a trade agreement with Asia for our value-added products, for our diversified exports, because that's how we'll create the jobs in our economies. Last but not least, the continental free trade area, you know, the African continental free trade area is actually a huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity for Africans to start building regional value chains, to start diversifying export into this huge continental market of more than 1 billion people, and use it as a stepping stone for the global market, using as a stepping stone to integrate global value chains. So these are some of the recommendations of this new study. But most importantly, we need to create the right environment, the right investment climate in our countries for the private sector to invest. Investment is very low in our countries, and to create those jobs. That's how you will diversify those exports and claim a bigger share of the global economy.
This interview will be coming to an end shortly, but let's unpack a few issues together. In that environment in which you are talking of recovery with all the recommendations, one key features of the African economic environment today is a very huge debt ceiling, roughly 702 or $20 billion. Who pays for it at the end of the day?
Well, that's a very important question, Charles. Public debt has been increasing dramatically in sub-Saharan African countries, and even before COVID. And COVID didn't make it easier, right? Debt increased because countries had to spend to face the pandemic. So debt has been increasing, and the number of African countries that have now become at risk, moderate or high risk of debt distress has increased to almost 50% of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa. 1 out of 2 countries in Africa is at risk of debt distress. This is serious. And most of these countries have debt above 70% of GDP. A number of these countries have issues with debt sustainability, which means they're probably not going to be able to pay back or to service that debt because they cannot collect enough revenue to pay back. A number of African countries have debt sustainability issues, which means basically that countries cannot collect enough revenue to pay just the interest on that debt, right? I visited an African country a couple of months ago, and the country was basically spending 90% of its revenue just to pay back debt and civil service salaries. Nothing left for education, nothing left for health hospitals or anything for the population. That's a situation we don't want countries to be in. So, who pays the debt? Unfortunately, we do. The people in countries pay the debt because countries borrow on behalf of their people, and they have to collect the revenues to pay and to service that debt.
In that debt environment in which you are talking, what will be the role of the World Bank in helping African economies work out of it?
Charles, the first thing is we need to work with countries to improve debt management. We need to debt management capabilities in countries. We need to make sure we reduce the non-concessional borrowing, which may turn to be extremely costly, especially in an environment where interest rates will be rising. We need to also work to ensure that countries generate enough fiscal space to be able to service that debt. Most importantly, Charles, it is crucial for countries to ensure that debt is better invested, right? Because when you borrow, what matters is not how much you borrow, is how you use it and what you use it for. If you invest the resources you borrow in areas such as human capital building, such as infrastructure, then there could be
the
energy, digital, all are areas that could increase productivity of the economy across sectors, generate new sources of growth, or allow existing sectors to grow faster. And that's certainly extremely, extremely important. What the World Bank has done when COVID hit was to implement the Debt Service Suspension Initiative, DSSI, that basically stopped payment of interest for 6 months to allow countries to give countries some breathing space, right? We also work with countries to engage in the common framework mechanism that is basically working out debt treatments for countries in debt distress or at high risk of debt distress. So we're working with countries to make sure we avoid another debt crisis like we had in the early 2000s.
The World Bank Chief Economist for Africa, Dr. Albert Zeufack, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
Thank you very much, Charles, for having me.
You are welcome. You saw innovation, you saw future in one location, plus 100 countries participating, expected to have about 25 million visitors. Already 3 months into, we have about nearly 5 million visitors already. When you say the vision of the Sheikh came to fruition, what are the kind of innovations that you see that wowed the crowd? An artistic display of the opening ceremony itself?
Yeah, I mean, in today's world, technology is taking over. In Dubai, at Dubai Expo 2020, I did not see a single police. I witnessed robotic police. I witnessed driverless cars. I witnessed innovations that we all see all on the TV. And it was like the future in display for all of us that attended, particularly the first week of the Dubai Expo 2020. So as somebody that I have lived in the US, I realized that the Dubai Expo 20 was and which is still going on till March 2022, is an opportunity to showcase the future of the world.
The future of the world, of course, being played in the Arab world, which over the years has been an area of conflicts and whatsoever. What do you think in particular contributed to such a flamboyant ceremony in a country already known to be the only one on planet Earth with a 7-star hotel? Was the startup industry key to that magnificence?
The Dubai Expo has a lot of pavilions. One of the significant pavilions that I happened to visit was the Global Village, the Global Startup Village. The Global Startup Village brought together startups from different countries to come and showcase their works under one pavilion. And when I visited that pavilion, I was very impressed of what the future has to hold, because I've been paying attention with the word smart homes. But I visited a couple of smart homes to witness how I can just be in my house and control everything with a touch of a button. And I think that's where we are going to. The future is moving towards technology, and Dubai Expo is really showcasing that.
Carefully, if you look around the world, you have about 12,000 fintechs, or what they call financial technology companies, like you are saying. When you look at the UAE market, the United Arab Emirates financial technology market you are talking about in terms of small and medium-sized enterprises, how critical are they?
I think Dubai specifically is very open in terms of unleashing the beauty and the smart technology of the world. For example, so many people that are into cryptocurrency are moving from India, Iran, are all establishing in Dubai, because even in Dubai I saw a crypto ATM. So those that are even in crypto can use an ATM when we talk about Bitcoin and all of that, because Dubai, which is the host of Dubai Expo, is really open into being that center to showcase how the world is going to be. And they're doing it. For example, when you visit Dubai now, you can check in at the airport with your face. You don't need your passport.
You mean the role of artificial intelligence?
Everything when it concerns to like the future of technology, the future of artificial intelligence, smart technology and all of that is being showcased in Dubai. And I realized that COVID came to make us to restart our thinkings, because when we look into like many countries in Africa, we had to start forcefully thinking about technology when COVID hit, because we start trying to see how we can get tickets online, how we can communicate, how we can work from home, how we can do everything with the help of technology. But Dubai and UAE are far ahead, and are using Dubai as a center to showcase those in different parts of the world that are leading in various different domains.
You just spoke about technology, and Expo 2021 or 2020 in Dubai was a kind of diplomatic leverage for a a country like the United Arab Emirates, what do you think developing countries or emerging economies, especially those in Africa, can replicate or learn or gather or suck or tap from the model staged by the United Arab Emirates?
I will just put it in a simple word: entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is the backbone of economic development. And in entrepreneurship, when we talk about entrepreneurship, we need to focus on the young generation. Dubai is really creating platforms, really creating programs that enhance and push for entrepreneurship and support entrepreneurs to unleash their best potentials and take it to the next level. So in African countries, if we can see what is happening in places like Dubai and try to replicate, then we are going to focus on our young generations. And when we focus on our young generations, we are going to realize that a country like Cameroon, we have a lot of entrepreneurs. We have a lot of young people with talent, with skills, with businesses in their minds that if they put it into reality, it can transform.
When you talk of a lot of economic transformation using entrepreneurship, this is a word overused by those who have succeeded in the entrepreneurship environment. Tony Elumelu, Aliko Dangote, they have all been part of this program. Steve Masiyiwa from Zimbabwe, Mark Zuckerberg, these are people who started their companies individually. How has entrepreneurship redefined the economic model in the world? For people to see that, because these are companies that started in a single room. Today, they are global giants.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at you, you mentioned about Mr. Aliko Dangote. If you realize, he runs a lot of traditional businesses. In the today world, we have seen companies like Facebook, we have seen companies like Alibaba, less than 10 years running the world because they are leveraging technology. Now, I happen to school at the
Alibaba, the Chinese dominated online platform.
Yes,
okay.
You know it, and you've seen situations where the tech related businesses have really helped many societies of today. I happen to study at the University of Texas at Austin, and in Austin there is a program, there is a center called Capital Factory. Companies like Twitter all came out from South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, and today most of us, many people are on Twitter. What I'm trying to mention here is that if we try to create programs for young people in Africa, people like Tony Elumelu are already doing it, but him alone cannot solve the problems that we have in Africa. So I always say, if we replicate what governments are doing like in UAE, in various African countries, and believe in our people, believe in our young generation, we are going to be very impressed with what can come out from the young people of Africa.
You yourself, you are an entrepreneur with plus 10 years of global business networking with numerous awards, and we'll enter that in a moment. You spent much of your time studying in the US. You decided somehow to operate in the Middle East. Why will you leave America, considered as the world's best destination, and do business in the United Arab Emirates?
We have to understand the world first. UAE is the center of the world in terms of even traveling and in terms of business. It is a very important location for international trade. I am heavily into international trade and investment. So when I look into a continent like Africa, I am a Pan-African. I believe in Africa and the vision for Afri-developism. So when I try to push for the growth of my businesses, mainly in solar energy, I realized that I needed to have a warehouse and a center in Dubai so I can easily move my products from Dubai to various African countries than in the USA. So it's all strategic, and I believe every businessman want to succeed. It's not only about where you are, it's how you are going to do your business in order to succeed.